Welcome everyone to PMI North India's Learning Right series of webinar. PMI North India brings you its next webinar, Privacy Engineering in Global Projects. This is presented by Mr. Ricky Jha, who is CEO PRICORIS QATAR. He is CIPP, CIPM, FIP. He is a data privacy protection and trust engineer architect. Ricky is founder and CEO of multiple new age technology ventures, including the pioneer in upcoming disruptive domains. He steered Privacy Virtuoso Global, a boutique privacy consulting firm which focus on helping companies overcome socio-technical challenges of trust and privacy issues that have surfaced from IoT, AI, and digital space. He is seasoned distinguished privacy professional, a fellow at IAPP, an author, blogger, speaker, and passionate advocate of trust and privacy engineering. Expert in managing, designing data compliance strategies, drafting national policy and standards, including PMI. Ricky Jha will create an elementary understanding of the concepts of privacy engineering that will be central to product and services development going forward. As digital transformation is disrupting the way organizations operate, it is imperative for project management professionals to understand and appreciate the elements of data privacy and protection requirements. Privacy professionals have long discussed the importance of building privacy and rather than bolting on it, privacy by design. But as technology has raced ahead, the need for privacy engineering has evolved and intensified. Privacy engineers ensure that privacy considerations are integrated into product design. Globally, practitioners view it as a process management, others see it more as a technical know-how. Both views seems equally valid and integral. Over to you, Ricky Jha.
Thank you, Rakesh. And I think I will ask the golden question to everyone that I hope I'm audible. And
yes, you are loud and clear.
That's the most crucial question these days. So I think he was very kind in introducing in a very fancy way. But then let me set the tone for this discussion. In next 40 minutes or so, we will try to understand how is data privacy and data protection, is now becoming a global voice across the industry, not just only in the digital industry. It is something which has been concerning now both academics and government of all country. And we would also see that what are some challenges, in terms of implementing privacy in different projects. And we will briefly touch and then see that what is the next level requirement when it comes to project managers. And I do work with a lot of project managers across the globe, so I will try to share bits and pieces of my interaction and my experiences. We will reserve the last 10-15 minutes for the question and answer. And I think the way it works, you can type it down, and Rakesh will read those questions at the back end of the session, and we'll discuss it. So, not wasting time, quickly jumping into the deck. So a bit of my background, not from the book of world. Very simple background. So I spend a lot of time with pets. So I'm a pet lover. I love animals to an extent that I can give complex to human beings when it comes to my love and affection for animals. So I do spend a lot of time. And especially COVID is a blessing in disguise, where I'm spending a lot of time with my family, which includes my pets. When I'm not doing privacy, or at least when I'm awake, You will find me in the kitchen. I'll spend a lot of time in cooking. That's one of the things which keeps me motivated, even in a day. And I think it's something which all of you can try. That on your gloomiest day or on your happiest day, that's the similarity between your pet and the cooking thing. That whether you're upset, whether you're happy, your kitchen will always welcome you. In a different way, in a very warm, compassionate way. So yes, I do a lot of cooking. A bit of my background, what I do in the current sense of privacy. So I've been doing privacy for quite some time now, and I do it for bread and butter. So that certainly means that I have to be razor focused, and I have to be really good in terms of the privacy knowledge. So just to bring out a few things which I do in privacy these days. So I'm working with a couple of governments, including the government of India, in designing the new legislation for privacy. So India is also contemplating a new privacy bill. The bill is in the draft stage. Hopefully by end of this year we will have our own privacy legislation. And in that sense, this particular seminar and event becomes really, really imperative to all the project management professionals who would be working on projects, not only IT projects, be it construction project, be it paralegal projects, or be it techno-legal projects. It becomes very imperative that you understand that what is the building block, at least on a helicopter view, for the privacy requirements. Because the way it's going to happen in India, it's going to happen very soon, very quick. You will see that India will, some number crunching which we did, with the help of DSCI. India will need a lot of privacy professionals. India will need a lot of privacy projects to accomplish those objectives. So we certainly see that privacy will be needed, in all the steps of project, and that's the reason I think I chose to keep privacy engineering as one of the topics rather than something else. Now, when I'm not working with the government, I do spend a lot of time in the academia. So I go to IIT, IIM, and a lot of other colleges, primarily engineering and management colleges, to teach about privacy and on how can you assimilate privacy as a core concept within your engineering paradigm or probably within your management structure. I am associated with IAPP, where I'm responsible for designing I'm a member of exam development boards. I'm responsible for designing the exams and the way exams will happen, and probably the way professionals will be certified in coming generation for IAPP. So an IAPP is the single most largest. The way we have PMI for project management, similarly we have IAPP for privacy professionals. It's an international association. So I'm a board member there. I'm a fellow with IAPP right now, and I'm a fellow of information privacy. So those are the things which I do. Obviously, certifications. The way I see these are like more of social recognitions. But yes, I do work with NIST. I represent Asia Pacific to NIST in the US. I work with NASCOM very closely in project management. One of the reasons I'm trying to give those an introduction that probably it will help you that in coming slides, and I will quote some examples in some instances. It will give you a sense of comfort that okay, whatever I'm sharing has substantial data or background to prove it. I'm definitely not talking based on Google search ability, or I'm not talking in thin air. So what is privacy? That's the golden question, and I would have loved to probably it have been more interactive, but just to make it unidirectional monologue. In a very simple way, if we pick up what is privacy, privacy from a dictionary of Harvard, so the privacy as a requirement was first published in 1980s in Harvard literature, 1890, not 1890s. 1890, with two professors, they first time thought of privacy as a concept, in a format of law. Now, very simply put, privacy is nothing but right to be left alone, right? So you, me, someone else, most of the time they want a zone which is like their zone, right? So you don't want to be bugged, you don't want to be disturbed in that zone, and that zone is known as your private area or your privacy territory. And so to put it into a very simple term, in a very layman's term, privacy is nothing but right to be left alone. Right? Privacy is something which allows you to keep a control on how much information you want to share about yourself. To perspective of your day-to-day activity, the reason you have a latch or a bolt on your door, and then you prefer sleeping behind the curtains in a closed door in your bedroom. The reason you want to take shower with a closed door the reason you wear clothes, right? The reason we have cubicles. All these aspects are framed in the society because you want some level of seclusion, right? You want to be secluded in a certain way, and you want a control that how much of your information or how much about you you're comfortable sharing with the outer world, and you're doing it at your pace. Now, clearly, that raises a very interesting point that psychologists over the period of time, they have tried to define privacy, and they have gone so far in saying that okay, privacy is nothing but a state of mind, which I also agree to an extent. To give you a very rudimentary example, let's say there's a person called Martha, and she's traveling on a vacation, and the kind of clothes she wears to choose, so the kind of clothes she wears to choose in her wardrobe, let's say in Spain versus Barcelona versus US versus Bangladesh or India or Saudi Arabia, will have a lot of influence on the cultural aspect of the country, how culturally warm, acceptable they are to a particular dressing sense. Number two, it will also depend on how Martha perceives that what is privacy as a term for her. Right? You will find Martha A, she may be very comfortable putting a bikini and posing a photograph on the Facebook in Barcelona, which will be completely acceptable. At the same side, if you think that if someone, let's say Martha B, tries to do the same thing in a country like Saudi Arabia or India, it can become a sensationalized news. It can become a viral video. It can become a lot of hush hush noise in the society. So that brings to the point that privacy is state of mind, but it is also influenced by the cultural norms, the religious beliefs, or so to say in private, in the PMI language, there's a lot of environmental factors, which will certainly define what privacy is for the individual. So it becomes very complicated to manage privacy. And that is the reason that if you talk right now, as we speak, you'll see in the coming slide that there are multiple privacy laws across the globe, and there are multiple privacy laws which are coming in picture, but very few of them are actually called privacy law. Most of them, they are called data protection law or data protection act or data protection legislation. One which we have in India as well is known as personal data protection bill, which will become act eventually. One which is talked about globally is GDPR. It is also general data protection regulation. You will find, so in my experience, I work with around 37 to 38 of privacy laws across the globe, and I've studied more than 78 of them so far. But out of all of them, only 4 of them talk about privacy directly. Most of them will talk about data protection in specific. And the answer is very simple. From an engineering perspective, or from an engineering promising factor, it is much more easier, convenient to design controls around data and to establish data protection than to create something which will regulate a state of mind. Imagine tomorrow, I say that okay, I need a framework or I need a set of technology to balance out how do you feel about someone, right? Let's say I want to regulate the feeling of love. Phenomenally, it's a nice idea to have, but then it will not be possible to regulate a human value. And we'll talk about something on those lines in this topic. When we talk about engineering, how did it evolve? So privacy, what is privacy? Privacy is a fundamental right. And you have to be very cautious that when I say fundamental right, that may not be true in all geographies. Privacy is fundamental right in context of India, and that's the reason I kept it here. But then globally, if you want to divide the entire businesses, or so to divide entire human race into 2 categories, or the countries in 2 categories of privacy, you will see that there are a bunch of countries where privacy is certainly called a fundamental right. I mean, it is clearly protected by constitution and it is a fundamental right. At the same time, you will find that there are parallel countries, or there are contemporary countries where privacy is talked about, but it's not fundamental right. Or so to say, there are places where privacy is not talked about at all. Okay, it's not talked about at all. To give you some example, let's say India, because of Justice Reconciliation Committee, and we have a privacy there, and privacy is a fundamental right. The 9th bench justice gave privacy as a fundamental right in 2017 again. So since privacy has become a fundamental right in India, now India is trying to make a act which will try to mobilize the value of privacy, because giving privacy as a fundamental right is one thing, but how do you ensure that the industry really respects that and it gives to you as a as a preferred right is another thing. So that is where Indian government is trying to write a act which will try to mobilize privacy, and they're doing it again through data protection because they think that data protection is much more cleaner way to regulate rather than privacy. Because as I mentioned, privacy is a state of mind, and state of mind cannot be regulated, right? Everyone has a different state of mind. Within the same geography, within the same room, you will find people who have different privacy requirements. They have different privacy needs. You will find people who are comfortable sleeping outside. You'll find people comfortable sleeping with the lights on. Those are the things which goes beyond psychological effects of privacy. Those are certainly you want to establish a sense of belonging in your own region, in your locality, in your territory, and that is where privacy comes in picture. To give you another example of privacy as a fundamental right, not being a fundamental right, is US. Now, if you talk about US, in US, the Fourth Amendment, in the Constitution talks about privacy, but US does not guarantee privacy as a fundamental right. It's mentioned there, it's not a fundamental right. Vis-a-vis, but then yes, though even it's not mentioned as a fundamental right, if you look at US, some of the best things possible in the privacy literature are available from the US side of the world. For example, HIPAA, right? HIPAA is a privacy compliance. CCPA, which came in January from California. You talk about Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act from finance. You talk about Federal Credit Reporting Act. You talk about FTC guidelines on Privacy Shield. So all these things, they really evolved from a sectoral model from US, despite the fact that they don't have a privacy as a fundamental right. But they do think that industry certainly needs something in order to maintain a regulatory regime. I can go on and on. Another example is Europe. Europe has privacy as a fundamental right, and that's the reason. Though it came very late in 2000 and it was incorporated in Charter. Prior to that, they used to rely on some European charter, which later on they realized that they should have their own charter, and they created their own Charter of Human Rights, and that's where they decided to keep privacy as well. One of the reasons you can't, and this is something which is more of a tip to all the professionals here, that you can't really compare Europe and India or Europe or US in terms of privacy practices, or even, so to say, the quote-unquote GDPR practices, because privacy as a practice is almost 45-year-old practice in European Union. When India came up with the Privacy Act, it will be just a couple of months old, right? So you can't really compare a unicorn with a newborn horse baby, because you're talking about generations gap, right? So that is what is a big problem in the industry right now. That even in India, when people talk about privacy, they talk about privacy projects. They somehow rely on their Google search ability, and unfortunately, fortunately, whatever they find out on Google, to a large extent, is something which transcends or talks about European world, which is privacy averse, and which has privacy as a practice for last 45 odd years. So you have to be very mindful in future when you talk about project management and incorporating privacy practices, or as simple as writing a JD. Very recently I did highlight something which was one of the big companies in India, where they wanted to hire a data protection officer and a chief privacy officer, and they rolled out a very funny JD saying that they need somebody with a GDPR experience of 10 years, right? And that looks very stupid on the face of it, because GDPR itself came in 2016, right? So are you trying to hire someone who was actually a board member or a review committee member who was writing GDPR, and you want to hire them? That's not the case, right? So those are the things which you have to keep in mind. And so privacy is a fundamental right in context of India. It is essential to autonomy and protection of human dignity, serving as the foundation upon which many other human rights are built, right? If it is a matter of interest, and if you psychology is something which you really love, you will find that other human rights are psychologically and they are hinged to the principle of privacy. For instance, right to practice a religion, it is directly hinged towards the privacy, right? Privacy law itself says that any individual has a right to not to disclose what religion they practice, right? And so the right to practice a religion is directly linked to the privacy. So this is really, I wanted to bring it to you, that what is privacy and what are the basics of privacy in the beginning. Why does it really matter? It does matter because if I have to put into a very Harvard kind of definition, it says that Any point of time an individual thinks that if he discloses or she discloses a piece of information about him or her, and the behavior of society will change towards him or her, or a general right which is available to everyone will be deprived from her or him, is a case of privacy violation. To give you a very laymanish example, let's say the moment a person X says that, you know what, hey, I'm COVID positive in the modern scenario, in the current scenario. If he or she says that, okay, I'm COVID positive and I was detected with COVID, you can imagine in the current scenario how the society and the behavior towards that particular person will change, right? As simple as that, he may be sacked or asked to leave from a company. As basic and rudimentary as that, he may not be allowed to play with others, or going to a park in a public place, or as complicated as that, he can end up a relationship, he can break up a relationship, probably he can file a divorce. So sky's the limit, and I'm talking about a simple example, which is a very Gen X kind of thing, which has just happened right now. But if you try to think it beyond that one COVID example, you think about HIV as an example, right? Somebody being HIV, somebody, let's say, person X, has, because of some certain circumstances, he or she was in prison for some time, and then he or she served some period of time in prison, and now that information is history, right? But do you think that if he or she disclosed that information, people in the organization will really behave the same way they used to? No, certainly not, right? Imagine you are in Middle East and you say that, okay, I am a Jew, right? Or let's say you are in Israel and you say that I am a Muslim, right? I follow Islam. All these things are examples, which will directly or indirectly impact the behavior of society towards you, and that's the reason privacy is a big problem now. With every data breach which is happening these days, it's just not financial loss or financial fear which is building up. There are multiple other things that will really affect you. In that sense, if you're interested, if you really want to spend time, you can contact me. I can give you some literature on something which is known as contextual privacy and the harms of contextual privacy. Now, contextual privacy in a very simple term would be that, let's say, Rakesh is a doctor or Sunita is a doctor, and I'm a patient. I go to Sunita for treatment. The contextual privacy describes that, whatever I share with her, in terms of that diagnosis and treatment, by default, she should be respectful to securing that information, and then she should give me that basic level of privacy. That is a privacy in context, right? So a husband and wife, when they talk to each other, there is no set and precedented law, which defines that, okay, when a spouse talks, among themselves, the content should be protected. But that's more of a context, which is built in the society that, there are certain contexts. Let's example, it's, doctor-patient, lawyer-client, right? Husband-wife, a teacher-student. All these kind of things are contextual privacy. And this is something which needs to be balanced with, against something which is known as differential privacy, which is often taught in the industry by a lot of privacy professionals and engineers, but nobody really understands what is differential privacy. So moving in the direction, modern PM should care about privacy, and why do they need to care about privacy, or at least to what extent they need to care about the privacy. So if you look on the left hand side of the screen, they should be clear that, why they should not learn about privacy, and probably I was trying to answer that question in the last couple of minutes or last 10 minutes that I was trying to answer that. Why should you learn about privacy? You should understand the philosophy of privacy. Now, in some way, nutshell, you understand that privacy is a state of mind, and obviously, whatever projects you will do or whatever projects you're doing, whether it's IT, non-IT, legal, legal, you're eventually dealing with human beings, and privacy is all about protecting information of human being. As a PM, you will, as a PGM, as a portfolio manager, you will interact with a lot of human beings. You will address a lot of scenarios, which will have HR related issues, which will have issues related to legal compliances, investigation. As long as you're interacting with human being, you cannot skip the fact that there will be certain privacy scenarios which will build up in your project, and you need to be respectful for that. Now, this is something which is your internal privacy map. Quite possibly, you may be an individual who is directly working on a project which itself is, let's say, a privacy implementation project. As I mentioned, that when Indian law will come, you will see a multiple fold rapid growth in the project related to privacy, whether it's government, semi-government, public-private partnership. So banks, commercial activities, academics, excuse me, you will see a lot of these things happening. Now, philosophy of privacy is something which will help you to understand and keep your head straight that, how do you want to implement privacy in a practice. Legal aspects of privacy, as I mentioned, that India will have a law, or GDPR is something which is in Europe, CCP is something in the US, PPI is in Canada, OP is in Africa. So every country now slowly and gradually is moving towards a privacy regime. So A, there's something which is a philosophical need of privacy, which you have to understand from a high level. But B, you also need to understand that what is the legal side of privacy, and that's where you will try to get your requirements directly from legal world, right? And this is where your environmental factor of your project will come in picture. Your legal regulatory requirement will be one of your environmental factor. And not surprisingly, I've started already seeing that a lot of charters, in the very beginning of the projects, the charter itself will start incorporating any project requirements. So let's say you're developing a software, the charter in the assumption section can very well say that, okay, we are developing this software, assumption that the final outcome or the deliverable will be only accepted if it is privacy compliant with the GDPR norms, right? So that can be something which you can build in the thing. Or let's say the project itself will be awarded to you if you are respectful to the privacy. Privacy in many ways is now also a unique select proposition for you. So it's a USP. Any given day, let's say, one of us, if we want to, let's say, go to a social networking site, or let's say a dating site, or maybe let's say, we want to go to a bar to, have a cup of or mug of preferred beverage. We will go to a place, or we will go to a service provider who claims at least that he or she is privacy respectful, right? So that is something which is there, which is something which is being talked about. And to give you a real life example, think about Apple, right? If you have closely observed all the advertisements in past 20 odd months of Apple has done nothing but they are all trying to do and be respectful of the privacy. Till date, within the mobile community or the cellular world of product development, one of the most respectful company is Apple. It used to be RIM, the Research Innovation Group, which was BlackBerry's division. But now, fortunately, it's Apple, which is very privacy respectful, thanks to their architecture and hardware model. But yes, it is something which is very much appreciated in the privacy landscape. And equally, Android is the opposite of it. Okay, so engineering aspects of privacy, and that's something which we'll talk about. Foundational aspects of privacy, which we will try to touch base. If you do a quick comparison between security and privacy, I want to make it very clear to all of you, and you can quote me on that. That privacy is not security. Security is something which enables privacy. There's no direct relationship. There's no 1 by alpha by 1, so it's not directly or indirectly proportional. To give you a context, let's say all of us right now, we sit in a meeting room and we do the same conference. Now this meeting room has a camera enabled into it. The reason you have put a camera because your company wants to build some security so that one of the participants or all of the participants, they don't create ruckus in the meeting room. They don't end up in spoiling the company property, or they don't end up in stealing something, or they don't indulge in sexual harassment or something, right? But at the same time, if you look at the flip side, the same camera is also trying to take away a lot of privacy from you, right? Let's say you're sitting there and you're picking up on your nose, right? Or you're trying to scratch a body part, right? So these are things which will be visible to someone who's monitoring the CCTV camera. So by putting more camera in that room, you will take away more privacy, right? So that certainly means that that says that okay, but that's not the case, right? That's not the case. The reason you want to take a shower inside a closed room and you want to have a latch-in door, which is a security measure, because you want to enjoy privacy. So that means the door is more secure, you're more private. So I have given you the both extreme side of it. There is no direct correlation. It's just that the way we call it, that security is something which will require and to enable privacy, which in a larger sense tries to also bring semblance in a world where people are constantly fighting between that, okay, whether CISO is superior or data protection officer is superior. Well, none of them are superior. They have their own roles to do. In a very simple way, at least when I try to explain a non-privacy professional, I tell them that if you look at the whole privacy landscape, up until now, especially if you're working in the IT industry, probably you'll be able to relate it. Up until now, at least until 2016, globally, organizations were very focused on trying to secure data and everything. But whether it was a fancy firewall, an expensive DLP, a high-end SOC solution, or all those things were primarily done from an organizational point of view. They were thinking that data is their data. They were more concerned about cybersecurity threat on the brand, on the company, rather than being respectful of the privacy of the customer. With the onset of privacy wave across the globe, with the GDPR especially, the focus is now shifting towards the end customer, right? Where we think that no, a company like Oyo, a company like Amazon, a company like Uber, or let's say a company like IBM or Microsoft, all of them eventually they are building something, and they are heavily dependent on data of the end customer, and the end customer data is something which is very high risk material, right? And we should be very careful about for protecting that. Right? Imagine that you're using Fitbit, and Fitbit sells your data to an insurance company, and based on your health and exercise pattern, next morning you start receiving a call from let's say policybazaar.com saying, hey, probably you need to buy insurance plans. We can tell you that we have evidence that you will soon or later you will get a heart attack, right? On the face of it, as disheartening it sounds, as scary it sounds, I'd say it will be very annoying to you from a privacy perspective. So if you look at the screen right now, with the Venn diagram, we have tried to put that on the red circle, on the pink circle. Privacy is very broader. It is something which is, as I mentioned, the state of mind. So it's very broader. You have to interpret. It depends on notice and consent. Everyone, for example, you go to a mall, you are under CCTV surveillance. That's an example of notice. The reason they put that, because they are telling you basically that, hey, we are putting a camera. We are doing a surveillance. You please get your acts in order, right? The last thing which I want that you step with your girlfriend in a mall, and you try to kiss her in a public place, and the camera footage shows that both of you, and you try to claim that your privacy has been violated. The company can very well come and say that, hey, dude, I told you that you're being watched, and we are doing so because we are protecting our property, and legally we're allowed to do so, right? It's the same example, like the floor is wet, and you still want to go and fall onto it. You can't claim insurance, right? Consent is equally important. One of the things which you have started seeing across the globe now, that you go to any website, they try to give you a cookie consent, and they try to seek consent from you. So openness, your system should be transparent in telling that, hey, Sunita, I will take this data and I will do this thing with this data, and this is how long I plan to keep it. This is how long I want to use it, and the reason I'm using it, I will use it for this purpose, right? So these are the principles, these are the tenets of privacy. In the best interest of time, I will skip few of them. Then the security part is, as I mentioned, it enables privacy. So defense in depth, data loss prevention or data leakage prevention, security, events management, firewall. All these things are something which will make sure that if the kind of privacy which I have promised to my customer is also being guaranteed by my controls. So if you ask me as a privacy professional, beyond this presentation, the way we always call it controls, and security or legal controls are something which enables privacy. Now there's an overlap in between them. Accuracy, availability, accountability, which is nothing but the CIA, right? Confidentiality, availability. We will quickly see in this next screen that how the CIA has transformed into newer generation privacy requirements. So if you look at the globe right now, we are going up in the direction of movement. If you see the entire screen, which and look at the blue, the dark blue or the light navy blue pattern on the screen, these are the places where they have privacy. They have a privacy law or data protection law, and some of the geographies which probably all of you work with is obviously I'm not talking about China. We will talk about European Union. We will talk about Japan. I will talk about Canada. We can talk about Australia, right? And if you go at the bottom of the screen, these are the 8 countries which I'm giving, which is something contemplating a privacy legislation or regime, right? India is one of them. US by end of 2020, I think COVID has certainly put a dent, but then by let's say Q2 of 2021, according to the latest report, we will have more than 40 plus privacy legislation, or 40 states in the US will have privacy legislation. Now imagine the kind of complications you will have. Let's say if you are doing a global project, you're doing any global project, and you have resources working on your project who come from, like, let's say, different states of US, and assuming these 10 different states have the privacy requirements by 2021, and let's say you have resources from India, you have resources from Europe, you have resources from, let's say, Africa, your life will be very complicated, because the kind of communication management, let's talk about the knowledge management area from the PMI perspective. The knowledge management area, which will be directly impacted, will be your HR management, your stakeholder management, your communication management, your risk management. These are the few areas which will be directly managed and directly impacted by this management changes because of privacy requirements. To make it more complicated, this is something, this is how ugly, a privacy professional desk look like in these days. These are the things, these are the popular law which is there across the globe, and this is how things are getting complicated. You can see the dates, you can see either they are past or they are present, they have been revised. But imagine, forget about 139 laws which I was talking about. Just think about these laws, right? These laws which you see on the screen. And these are the laws which are already there, right? I'm not even talking about the one which is being contemplated. Now, all these things will something which will shape up your project environmental factors. So you have to be very mindful of that. This was a lucky of this was not to scare anyone, just to make sure that there is a gravity to privacy, and you need to appreciate it, as soon as possible. If you do, it will certainly help your project to stay compliant with global requirements, and also mature privacy practitioner in terms of privacy. So, what are the challenges? So I'm talking about challenges in the last past 5 years. So clearly, the biggest policy, the biggest challenge is the privacy policy management, right? And all of you who work in project management, I assume that all of you work in project management domain, and time and again you interact with multiple policies. One of the things which will happen directly or indirectly in your privacy project practices in privacy world will be a direct influence of privacy policy in the project. So if you're doing a project, if you're contemplating a project in an organization, I would still advise that please get a copy of your privacy policy. Now, as an auditor, I have seen this happening with a lot of banks, a lot of places. In fact, we did audit for RBI, and we saw the same thing. That what happens at, let's say, organization, let's say IBM. Talking about IBM. With no endorsement, we're not endorsing IBM. We're just taking an example. So, IBM is doing privacy management, and they're doing it amazingly good. They're phenomenal in the practices. And let's say, Pranav, is the project manager there. Pranav is working there. Now, when the Pranav starts working there on the project, he intentionally misses to address the privacy policy requirement, or he does not get privacy copy of privacy policy, and he does not ask his team to read it. Now, what happens that a company may be good, bad, ugly in the privacy practices, but they are as good as their third-party engagements, right? So while IBM was very good, but then this project which was responsible to outsource team or in-source team or hybrid team, this project team was not working according to privacy policy. That may lead to a lot of privacy risk, right? And I will try to I will try to shape up everything with an example of project management, but I hope all of you appreciate and understand that it's not possible to shape everything in the privacy shoe. But yes, let's see how close and how far we are. Governance and accountability. Now, clearly, if you talk about project management, you have to do project governance, and you have to do stakeholder engagement and stakeholder management. Now, both of these two things will certainly require you to operate within the narratives of privacy requirement. Because anywhere where they have one of the privacy laws applicable, they will also need a privacy governance framework and accountability framework. Be it GDPR, be it Indian upcoming privacy requirement, be it Singapore, be it Africa, MENA. It's very tough to find a country where they don't have a privacy requirement, unless you're talking about a country which does not respect human rights, right? Now, one of the other areas which you have to focus is within your privacy risk management. Whether you're doing it at a program level, or even, let's say, if you're thinking of a project selection technique, right? If you're doing a project selection technique and you're trying to think of a project, which will be a good project for you or a viable project for you, it will be very wise to incorporate privacy as a requirement in your project selection technique. Whether you're doing, a break-even or motherboard or whatever you use to select a project, it will be very highly recommended that you also try to include privacy as a requirement. A very simplistic way will be that to incorporate privacy as a requirement, let's say from a entry to barrier or burden to compliance, in whatever way you want to call it. The truth is, yes, it is a compliance cost. In a way, it's an entry to barrier to a lot of new technologies. But yes, you have to think it from the product selection point of view that, okay, let's say I have two options, in this project, developing a mobile application for a hospital, developing a web application for a sports company, right? And obviously, hospital is giving me more money, but then I will have to think about that. Okay, what should be the best way of picking this project? Clearly, if I pick up a project which is for mobile application for healthcare, it will have more privacy risk, and I have to become more compliant. And especially since you saw the screen, imagine an Indian company you're making a mobile application which will be used for doctors for communicate, and if you want to use it now, think of a scenario that your application has to be compliant by at least 50 or 50 plus privacy requirements to serve the major geographies. Unless you want to make an Indian version and you just want to make the Indian customers happy, you will have to just make sure that you follow the Indian privacy requirements. At the same time, I also want to highlight that while there are 139, 140 privacy legislations across the globe, a starkly similar resemblance. I would say a loose number that 70 to 80% of these privacy requirements are same, and that is where people have gone to an extent saying that okay, GDPR is the mother of privacy. Well, no, GDPR is not the mother of privacy. Unfortunately, in the world of privacy, all the oxygen has been sucked up by GDPR, and that's the reason people start comparing everything with GDPR. But the truth is, yes, GDPR has a similarity with our privacy law, and especially GDPR is something, and as I mentioned, Europe has privacy very, as a old practice. So countries like India, other places, when they were trying to write a new privacy law or legislation, they definitely thought to look on GDPR, and they have readily borrowed some concepts, and which is okay. It's always good to learn from a neighbor and from others' mistake, but you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So from a privacy point of view, selection point of view, that's where you will have to think privacy is a risk. But then in the general privacy management practices, even when you think about project management practices, there will be an overlap between your risk management and your privacy risk. As a project manager, you should also think about including risks in your privacy practices. Now, that can be as simple as let's say all of us, we have heard about the term co-location, right? Co-location in the privacy management, when we talk about what is the best way to communicate with the team, or let's say the formula which we use to calculate the channels, right? Now, whether you're calculating the number of channels required for communication, or whether you're thinking of co-location, or whether you're thinking of digital platform to interact with the global team, whatever is the scenario, do think the risks available to the individuals or the project team member from the privacy, number one. You also have to not constantly think about your own privacy. You also have to think about the deliverables. That have you baked in privacy into your end deliverable? Like, as for instance, if privacy is a requirement for the charter, do you know that whatever privacy, whatever thing that you're making, the product is privacy compliant? That is something which you also have to keep in mind. So these are the few areas which you have to think. I wanted to spend more time there, but I will just close it here. I'll move to the next slide. These are some global statistics, from an IoT development perspective. Just a random example. This survey is from 2019, and this was done on a big, large group, and specifically in the IoT development sector. It's something which was done for a smart city project. So if you look at the requirements, and if you look at the requirements from 2018 to 2019, definitely you will see that biggest growth after performance is privacy. Privacy has become a big talking point. Right from 11 to 18%, organizations are now thinking about privacy. Now, to be honest, a bit of it is obviously because of the GDPR and other things. But I'm waiting for the new report, and God willing, if we will talk about those reports. But I can tell you from my experience, from my engagement with a lot of global bodies like this. We work with World Bank in doing the privacy establishment recently. We also work with the for understanding the global privacy needs. They can move the privacy law. So one thing is for sure that privacy is certainly increasing day by day, and the requirements is also increasing day by day. Within the IoT sector, there's a jigsaw, and the reason I call it jigsaw because I mean you all as a privacy professional, you will understand in a better way that you will have you will have IT, you will have products or devices which will work there. You will have systems, you will have OT, right? All these things. So OT is operational technology, right? Operational technologies. Now, just a tip of iceberg. I don't want to spend more time there, but just a tip of iceberg to all of you. Fortunately, a lot of movement in digital world, security, technology, protection, these fancy meetings, seminars, everything. They're all talking about the devices, the bottom, the south movement, right? The devices, and the north movement, the systems, right? I can tell you that in coming time, it's not going to be the system or devices which will be a bigger problem. It will be the IT which manages the information technology management, and the operational technology which will become a problem. Imagine an IoT world. The endpoint is not endpoint in what you know, right? So for most of you, endpoint is a laptop or a device, a mobile device, or something which an end user is using. In IoT world, 80% of the endpoint is something which is as simple as a sensor, a humidity sensor, right? Ambient light sensor, right? Ambient gas monitor, right? A temperature monitor, right? Or maybe a robotic hand. All these things are the 80% fabric of IoT world, right? Or industrial IoT world. Now, when you think about privacy, right, you have to think from a different dimension. You no longer think that the way you think about privacy for using an Alexa versus the way you think of privacy of using, let's say, a smart television, or let's say the way you used of privacy of using your Apple Watch or Fitbit application versus the way you will think probably about a future refrigerator, which will tell you that, hey, you know what, the moment you try to grab a cup of ice cream from the fridge, it will tell you that, hey, you have already had enough calories for the day. I don't think that you should have it, right? And you will be so happy the way people were gaga about Alexa, but then later on, you will realize that everything is sitting down to a cloud-based system, and which is anything which is in cloud is is for everyone, right? I mean, one of the lines which I say that whatever is in cloud, it can brain anywhere, right? So if that's the problem, the privacy implications is going to be very huge. So if you look on the screen, this is the jigsaw of the next generation IoT and OT, right? We have tried to divide IT and OT because information technology or Internet of Things, Internet of Things managed information are something which are beyond your data, emails, and other things, right? It is now going beyond that, and the definition of devices and endpoints are also changing. We'll have to think about a variety of other aspects when it comes to privacy engineering. So, what is the need of ERA? If I have to put it into a privacy engineering principle, very simple way, the entire framework will look like simply the building blocks that you have privacy requirements. If you have privacy requirements, it will come from law. You have to create a project organization to do an assessment that how closely you are complying with the law. And then once you identify the risk, you have to identify that what controls needs to be implemented. And periodically you have to see that, okay, what will be the risk, causing harm to the privacy of an end person, right? And the moment you understand that, you select the controls, then you define your privacy engineering and security engineering objectives. Now, these objectives can be as simple as that, okay, I will try to make sure that privacy is my functional requirement in all the products, or in my product backlog, or in my product plan. Or you can say that, okay, privacy is by default a non-functional requirement at an org level. So let's say I'm a company called NIIT, hypothetically, and I'm responsible to develop software for multiple banks, multiple companies. Now, I will tell my client that, okay, whether irrespective to the fact you give me privacy as a fundamental requirement or not, or a functional requirement or not, our principle is very simple at an org level, that you will make a software which is privacy compliant. So those are the things which you have to keep in mind. Okay, let me just go to the next screen. I'm running short of time, but yes, CIA has now evolved, and now CIA, which is very security oriented, now we call them PMD. So if you talk about privacy lexicon or privacy maxim or privacy in the privacy world, we simply call them PMD. That what is the predictability of your system, disassociability available, and the manageability which you offer. Now, what are these three engineering objectives? So example, let's say I'm making a software. I have to make sure that, whatever data I keep about you, whatever data I store about you, it should be very less predictable that, whose data it is, right? In other words, that, even let's say if I have made a dating app, let's say I made a new version of TikTok, or not TikTok, let's say I made a new version of Facebook, Instagram, or let's say Tinder, or let's say, even, Zoom kind of application where people can meet. Any application which I make, I have to make sure that whatever data I store about you, if it's compromised, people should not be able to predict that whose data it is, right? So clearly, I have to do a lot of masking. I have to sensitize, and I have to sanitize the data. The predictability talks about enabling of reliable assumptions by individual owners and operators about personal information and its processing by an information system. That's the definition. But predictability is very similar to what it sounds, right? Dissociability is that you have to make sure that how do you disassociate your personal data with an individual? How do you break the connection, right? So that you anonymize it. And manageability is how do you manage the information over a period of time. Objectives. The objectives of privacy engineering. Quick time check. I think I will just 2 more minutes and then I will give back to Rakesh. So the elementary. So I was talking about the value system designing. So privacy engineering is something which, if you are more interested, you can talk about VST, which is value system designing, and it simply means that if you are designing a system which has to be respectful to a human value, and that human value can be hatred, love, privacy, generosity, romanticism, anything, right? But if you're designing a system which has to be respectful to the human value, you have to. This design requirements come from 2 things: values and norms. What are the values? Human values. Like honesty is a human value, right? Obviously, when a bank is designing a software, they want the software to be honest, right? They want the software to be very trustworthy software, because that is one of the human value, right? That is not a technical requirement. But then what are the norms? Norms are, let's say, ISO 27001. That's a standard, which allows you to make sure that your ISMS is practiced, right? Or let's say 27701 or BS 10012, which talks about privacy, right? Or NIST SP 800, which talks about cybersecurity. So values and norms together, they will give the design requirements. Now I'm talking about design requirements. I'm not talking about functional requirement. I'm not talking about any other requirement. Now, what is design requirements? So the way you will design, this design is not the way we're talking about UI or UX. That's something different. We're talking about the design requirement at a product architecture level, or at a concept level. So the design requirements will always be influenced by these 2 things. You will have one value talking to multiple norms, and that's where you need to balance. So which brings to the point that what is PDB? PDB is privacy by design. So there are 7 principles. Anna Kukuman in 1990s, she was the commissioner of Ontario, Canada, and she gave this principle. Like all good things, it appreciated in 2016 in GDPR, and it was there for almost 20 years. Nobody appreciated it, because that's the irony of humanity, that so if somebody writes and does something good, it gets appreciated after a long time. It's too late. So she gave it in 1990, and she talked about that. Okay, whenever a system should be designed, privacy should be baked into the system. It should not be something which you should sell as an add-on, or should not be something which should be offered as an add-on. For example, if I give you a software, if I give you a phone and then I say, hey, this phone is amazing, but it has a lot of privacy risk. If you want to make your phone private, or more secure, or privacy respectful, buy this software from me. That's going to be a stupid idea, right? So that is something so it says privacy should be proactive, not reactive. Privacy should be by default, should be embedded into design. It should be full functionality, positive sum, not zero, which simply means that, okay, let's say if I'm designing a product, I have to add privacy, but I should not be adding too much of privacy, so that my product becomes unusable. ATM manufacturing company, and an ATM where I built privacy that somebody should not be able to check my PIN code and other stuff. But let's say I make it so complicated that I have to first train my customer how to use ATM machine, and then they stop using the ATM machine, right? So that will become a net zero, not net positive. End-to-end security, that privacy should not be something that, okay, I give you a software, my job is over, right? Privacy should be end-to-end, right from the data collection to the data destroyal. It should be respectful to the transparency. Whatever I do in the privacy engineering, whatever I do with your data, I should tell you upfront that, okay, this is what I want to do, and it should be user-centric. In the day end, privacy is something which you're trying to give to the end user, it should be there. It should be there for them. This is PVD. This is how project management has been mapped within NIST 800. That when you initiate and design, build a test phase in software development, or at least we'll try to make sure that how does privacy comes in. Privacy will really come in just immediately after you do a PIA. After you have done a business impact assessment or analysis, you do a PIA. I have shared a copy, and I think it's available to everyone. If you're interested in more, you can certainly reach out to Rakesh or other PMI members, and they can share some details. I think these were some examples, but I think I will just put it a pause. Thank you, Rakesh. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Ricky. That was a truly enlightening session. And I believe every project manager or someone doing project must listen to this. There is an appreciative note from Ayush as well. Fortunate to have the opportunity to get informational session from subject matter expert in field of privacy. You have few minutes for a few questions, and maybe you want to bring up the PDU slide that's here while we go through the Q&A. There is one question: how do you compare risk management aspect and principles through PMI versus your experience gained through other bodies such as IAPP, etc.?
So if I heard the question correctly, we're trying to compare the risk management between two different institutions.
How do you compare risk management aspect and principles through PMI versus your experience gained through other bodies?
Well, see, the risk. Okay, so risk management. Okay. So if you talk about the whole business science, business domain, in past 340 plus years, which is the known history of business science, in last 50 years, risk management has always been risk management. It evolved as a concept, obviously from strategic science, from military. But risk management, if you ask me, it is the same approach. So the same probability, same occurrence approach everywhere. In terms of doing a risk impact assessment, or in terms of doing a risk assessment or risk management, there's no change in the definition of risk as well. It's the same thing that it's an unseen event which can impact your project negatively or positively. That's the same definition which is there. But clearly, if you talk about PMI versus IAPP, they have different objectives, right? IAPP is something which is very hinged, very focused on project, privacy related issues. So their privacy impact assessment, their risk assessment talks about that what is the risk of the privacy on the individual. But if you talk about PMI, and most of the time PMI, it talks about the risk from two point of view, right? What is the kind of risk which you see on the project, right? And what are the chances? What are the limited chances or delimited chances of project being impacted by an event, right? Okay, whether it will impact the project to happen or not. The first level. We also call them program level risks at times. And the other risks are that, okay, what are the risks within the journey of your project management, which can be a temporary team level risk, let's say as simple as one resource wants to travel, but there's a possibility that he may not get the visa, right? Or within your supplier management, you see that, okay, in your procurement life cycle, you want to procure something and there's a risk that this vendor will not supply you something on the time. Or let's say you want to select, a fixed contract or something. What are the kind of risks? So those are the risks which are obviously, risks are risks, right? It's the same way that if I say that, okay, what is the difference in the sugar which comes from sugar cane versus which comes from, let's say, corn, right? They are both sweet, they are both sugar, and by definition, they are both sugar, right? It's just that they came from different origin and they have different needs and they have different requirements. Similarly, privacy risk management is something which is very focused. I would say completely focused on the individual rather than the organization. It does not try to protect the individual. Even some organizations have taken that route that they say, okay, we are taking this risk as our own individual company risk. But if you ask them, honestly, they will say, no, Ricky, the reason I'm doing it, I'm saying that, okay, what if I don't do this thing? How much fine I will incur, right? So again, that is something, which will come, when, let's say, Rakesh has a privacy right and he was not respected with that right, and Rakesh complains to a regulator, and that's where the company gets fined. So in reality, it's just that, it's another way of holding your nose, right? You want to hold it directly, or you want to come around, but then eventually you're talking about the risk at the individual, and the risk is only at risk for privacy. PMI, the risk management is very broad. We talk about multiple things, which includes risk both at the project and at the delivery.
Thank you, Vicky. People, the PDU information is off screen. There is a typo in the date, so please use today's date when you're reporting. The next question that we have is, what are various actions measures being taken in India regarding privacy?
Okay, so in India, as we speak, there's a third draft. So there's a Joint Parliamentary Committee (JPC), and so India came up with the first draft of data protection bill in 2018. It was out for public deliberation, and I'm just trying to make sure that what exactly is allowed to me beyond my NDA to talk about. So yeah, so 2018 it's for public deliberation. They're in public, which includes both industry and professions like us. They submitted their views, and I was also a member of that committee because I worked very closely with NASCOM, and NASCOM is one of the members which was part of it. So we reviewed the board reviewed all the inputs received from the industry and the professional fraternity, and they realized that it has some shortfall, and it was revised, and there was a second draft which was done, and this time this draft also talked about non-personal data, which is also being a hot topic, and as we speak right now, if you look at the news yesterday, I think the day before yesterday, it became a very hot topic that the government is trying to put a new regulator for non-personal data. So one of the things which India is trying to do, which is not a great idea in the privacy spaces, India is trying to come up with a law which will regulate both personal data and non-personal data, which is kind of, pardon my French, but which is kind of stupid when you make a legislation, because if you make a legislation, you have to think about two things, that it should only talk about one thing and you give leverage to the other thing. And especially a country like India, where we have a lot of foreign players, who are technology investors. We are a country where we are budding up, professionals who are doing a lot of startups, and a lot of innovation is happening. If you do such kind of policies, which will try to regulate both the ends of it, it's a way that I will have a law for criminal and non-criminal as well, right? Which is stupid, right? So in a room of 100 people, you will have either people who are criminals, or you will have people who are not criminal, right? So if you try to regulate both of them, then there's a problem. You have to pick which of you want to regulate, and you have to define that. How does one person switches from one bucket to another bucket, right? So when does personal information becomes non-personal information? So that is something which is a shortfall. So yes, so India is coming up with a new law as we speak, and the plan. What I can tell you in my limited ability, because I'm not allowed to talk in public forum on that, but India will present its bill in monsoon session, and hopefully, as they call Middle East, inshallah, that by November or by December, and it will be ready for a winter review. And by end of this year, especially with TikTok, all these things, it's becoming very evident that by end of this year, India will have its own privacy bill into converted into act. And India is also trying to establish a ministry which will be responsible as a privacy state of commissionerate. And one of the things which India is trying to do is that India will have every state will have some privacy officers. So it's going to be a very complicated structure, and India will also have heavy penalties. India is one of the few countries across the globe which I know where if a responsible officer, let's say a CISO, is part of data breach, he or she can be sent behind the bar. Okay? So which is clearly not a wise idea, because it has left very less incentive in India to somebody to pick up a job of a data protection officer or something like that. Right? So yes, those are the things which I think which is there. And, we'll soon have this law, so just wait and watch.
Oh, thank you so much, Ricky. I think we have run out of time. So run out of time, so there are still a few questions.
Yeah. Hey, am I audible,
Yes.
Rakesh and Ricky?
Yes,
Okay.
you are.
Hey, this is Sunita. Thank you, Ricky. Manoj sir would like to talk as well. The remaining questions, Rakesh, can we send it to Ricky in an email and maybe with the name of the person who posted it so we can respond them back with the answers?
I'll do that. I'll capture those.
Sure.
Since
I'm
we're
okay with
out
it.
of time. You're okay, Ricky. Thank you. Right.
Hello. Sunita, am I audible?
Yes, Manoj sir, you
Yes.
are.
Okay. Ricky, this is Manoj. Thank you very much, first of all, for taking our offer to come and do this session at a very short notice. And out of 6 or 7 webinars which we have done, this is the first one which I've attended from start to end. Generally, I'm not there for the whole duration. The topic and the presentation was very attractive and interesting, basically. So I thought I will just budge in and maybe thank you for the very informative and elaborate session on this.
Thank you so much, sir. It's a privilege. It's a privilege to talk to you again. I think we met a couple of years back at a PMI event at NCR.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, Manoj. So you met him at NCR when we hosted the PMI event. Ricky was part of that core group who organized the event.
Yeah, I saw him connected on LinkedIn, but I was not able to recall when I have met him.
Yes, we are connected. We are connected. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks again.
Thank you, sir. My
Everyone.
privilege.
Thank you, Ricky. Once again, thank you so much. Thanks everyone for taking time and joining this informational session. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.